The playoffs need to go. This is a statement and opinion shared by a quickly growing group of race fans across social media and inside the sport as well. I myself would like to see the playoffs gone as well, not because I have a blinding hate for the format itself, or because I have a rose-tinted glasses view of the classic Winston format. I want the playoffs gone because it's time. For the last 3 years, it feels like we've been limping this format onwards, trying to keep it going. Not because it's a great format, but because of the amount of times we had changed our championship system before this one. Between 2003 and 2023, the championship format changed 5 times, meaning we average a new format every 4 years. This in of itself is not conducive to creating for fans the idea of a respectable champion. But NASCAR sticking with the current playoff format for the better part of a decade now has led to a far greater problem. Instead of having a legitimacy problem in the form of an ever-changing championship format, we now have this problem in the form of lack of competitiveness. Since 2017, only twice has the winningest driver of the season won the title. Martin Truex Jr. in 2017 and Kyle Larson in 2021. The format is supposed to award winning, and it has failed miserably to do just that. It has gotten drastically worse in the last 5 years especially. Everyone will remember Kevin Harvick winning 9 races, just to be eliminated at Martinsville, not even having a shot to win the title. A similar thing happened in 2018, where both the most winningest drivers in Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick made the championship for, but lost to the 2 drivers that were 3rd and 4th in wins, both Joey Logano and Martin Truex Jr. Even finishing well has become irrelevant. In 2023, Ryan Blaney won the title with only 8 top 5s, the least in nearly 70 years. On top of that, his average finish was only 14th, the 7th best among all full-time drivers for that year. If Blaney's mediocre championship run wasn't a wake-up call to change the format, Joey Logano's run last year was definitely the one for sure. En route to his 3rd championship, he won 4 races, but only had 7 top 5 finishes, and an average finish across the year of 17th. He became statistically the worst champion in NASCAR history. And what made it even more miserable is that the driver he beat at the end of the year was his teammate Ryan Blaney, who had an even worse season than the year prior. This all happened in front of Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and Christopher Bell, all drivers who didn't even make the Final Four, but were the top 3 in average finish across the entire season. Kyle Larson being the most winningest driver that year with 6 wins. And to make it clear, the problem isn't that Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney are winning the championship. It's how they are winning the title. Almost everybody in the sport feels that either driver, if needing to, could perform well enough across the entire season to win the championship in a full season format. The only issue, they don't need to do that. The sample size for winning a title is so small that if you target just 3 racetracks, you can very easily make it to the Final Four. The format has also created incredibly embarrassing moments for the sport. Going back to 2020 when Kevin Harvick was eliminated, there were also countless questions asked about if JGR teammates were laying off for Denny Hamlin. Harvick then tried to intent wreck Kyle Busch for the opportunity to advance, failing to pass him after spinning him. Moving ahead to 4 years later, and Christopher Bell, the driver who scored the most points in 2024, attempts to wall ride trying to pass Bubba Wallace after he lifted off an entire lap to try and contradict a roadblock created by the Chevrolets to get William Byron into the Final Four. Spingate was a bad moment in NASCAR history. That had one team doing race manipulation. We now have a quarter of the field trying to manipulate the race. This is all a direct product of how the playoff format is structured. Outside of the obvious points people make about having cut lines and forcing drivers and teams into these situations to occur, the real issue comes from eliminating drivers from competition and devaluing gaining points outside of just winning races. The hyper-focusing on such a small sample size of a season and making it not matter for 3/4 of the field makes it so when Chevrolet has to make that call to Austin Dillon or Toyota to Bubba Wallace, the incentive for them to say no is almost non-existent. The mentality these days is if you're out of the playoffs, your season is pretty much over. The way the sport functions now, There is no value up and down the standings anymore. That's why race manipulation is so prevalent now. Now obviously, there can be race manipulation in a full season format. No matter what you do, you can never step away from having race manipulation. But it becomes so much harder for a team or a manufacturer to actually manipulate a championship when the sample size is so large across the entire season. A good example of how teams used to do this was when Hendrick or RCR would enter extra cars in the season finale, just to try and ensure a higher finish for Gordon or Earnhardt. The detractors of a full season format, I understand why you may not want one. A lot of people clamoring for one over the last few years are the same people clamoring for the old Winston format, which I personally do not want. Not because it is a bad format, but because we could do better. The format itself had its own flaws, not enough points for winning. A good example of that is a driver could win 4 in a row, but then blow up and finish 35th. A driver who finished 6th 4 times in a row, and then finished 2nd that 5th race, would be ahead of the driver who won 4 races, but I wouldn't be upset if we did go back to that format. To be honest, I would take what we have now and accumulate points through the entire season. One of the benefits we would have from points accumulating race over race would be the development of storylines becoming more natural. Currently, the stories of the season constantly revolve around the playoffs and nothing else. Let the event make themselves. If William Byron and Kyle Larson get in a battle for a championship, let the drama of teammates fighting over the title mount. If Ryan Blaney runs 10th all year in standings, but makes a late season charge up the points, let that happen. A decentralized look at who is going to win the title every week, and not a constant focus on who's going to make the playoffs and where those playoff points are going to accumulate, will make it so not only the drivers, but the events themselves actually breathe. The point was brought up that the tracks need the playoffs to boost their promotion, because having a playoff race would add excitement. The advertising line should never be the playoffs. It should be the Cup Series. NASCAR is racing at your track, in your town. That should be your selling point. We as a sport have spent so much time trying to build up the playoffs, trying to develop an aura around the last 10 races of the year, and what that means. But we've spent so little time on the actual events themselves, the drivers, even the sport. This is the main reason why we need to go back to a full season format. It's to send a message to the fans that have walked away from the sport over the last 2 decades, and to the ones who have stuck around, about what your sport really means to you. The hardcore group care about the championship more than anybody else, and wanting to restore legitimacy to that and the sport by showing every event matters, every moment counts, would go a long way for their trust and love for the sport. Because in the end, whether a casual or a diehard, we all came for one reason: the racing. And I've yet to meet someone who came to a race or fell in love with the sport purely because of the playoffs.